Here after Colorado's 7th practice, day 8 of camp. Brian, Mel Tucker was pleased with the stoutness of the front seven.
Yeah.
He said the best showing that they've had this camp.
Yeah, and especially kind of after calling them out a little bit the other day. He said they really showed up making plays in the run game. Naima Rodman got some reps with the first team. We've heard about a couple of those different freshmen stepping up at different times in camp. But he mentioned Jalen Sammy did really well today, Mustafa Johnson. So it's nice to hear some of those freshmen, though, Naima Rodman, Austin Williams, guys like that stepping up.
And it goes to the point that sometimes the guy you least expect it from is the one that stands out. At least that's been the case here at CU over the time I've covered the program. Naima Rodman played in a high level of football in high school, but didn't have a lot of offers. Yeah. Maybe it is that competition he faced in high school that's helping him out a little bit, I would think, early on.
Yeah, you would think so. I mean, you come from a school like that, and he knows how to play big-time football. He's coming in here. He's obviously a big dude. I mean, he's one of those guys that at the open practice last week we were looking at and saying, wow, these guys are huge. And Austin Williams, I think the first couple of days was the guy that was getting mentioned. But, this week a couple times with pads on, I mean, Naima Rodman is the guy that we're hearing right now. So they need a couple of those freshmen to step up. And so it's good to hear Naima. Maybe that experience of playing big-time high school football is paying off right now.
Another thing Mel Tucker was pleased about was the fact that even though the offense wasn't performing well early today, he heard a lot of the leaders on offense pushing them. As he said, we don't want front runners in this program. So that was the other thing that I kind of took away from his address to us.
Yeah, he mentioned Steven Montez and lots of different guys. Just Tim Lynott at points just saying, guys, let's go, let's get this going. And at the end of the day, Mel Tucker said this was another good day's work. And so they were able to adjust on the fly and have those leaders step up, and that's huge. And we've talked about that a couple times already in camp, how in spring it was pretty much all the coaches doing the leading, but the players are now stepping up and leading, and I think that's important.
Both of the guys we requested we weren't able to talk to, so we went plan B.
Yeah.
I talked to Tyson Summers, who you talked to quite a bit the other day. He mentioned Mark Perry as one of the guys that he's been impressed with this camp. Came in as a true freshman, showing more maturity. They needed him to have that mindset coming in. Even Mel Tucker talked about his maturity. Certainly he's swimming at this point, but he's a guy of these freshmen right now that you're putting the highest odds on to play. I think he's got to be at the top of the list.
Yeah, I think so, and he's been at that star position a little bit as well, running behind Davion Taylor a little bit. So he's physically ready to play. I think, he's swimming a little bit, but this is practice number 7, so they've got 3 weeks and a day until a game, and so he's got some time to really kind of get things going. And I think there's enough veterans in that starting lineup, at least early on, that can kind of bring him along a little bit. But if he comes along, I'm starting to like that safety group a little bit more.
And there is a lot of youth, especially in terms of depth defensively. Asked Tyson Summers, what's the biggest challenge there? And he said it's finding that fine line between being multiple, being able to diagnose things for the opposing offense, but also not throwing too much at these guys. So they have to find kind of that sweet spot with this young group, I think.
Yeah, they really do. And, when I talked to him the other day, he mentioned, I remember him saying this in spring, but he mentioned it the other day again. He said, the one thing consistently these guys do is they do everything we ask them to do. And they show up and they're willing to work and all that. And those are all positive things. But then I said to him, well, Tyson, that's great, but you still have to have players. And do you have players? He said, well, the honest part of all that is that we don't have very much experience right now, and that it's going to take some time for that to come along. So, you don't want to throw too much at him, but I think my conversation with him the other day is I think he likes the talent that's here. It's just none of us really know how they're going to perform when the lights come on.
DJ Elliott actually had a decent amount of success, especially when you consider what they lost going into 17. I thought last year they were actually even a little bit better than I thought at times. I like Tyson Summers' demeanor as a defensive coordinator more, though. He seems like a guy that can really get into guys if he needs to, but at the same time is going to have their respect. Have you gotten that same sense? Yeah,
for sure. And when I've asked defensive players about Tyson Summers, you sometimes ask players about a coach to say, yeah, I like him, he's a good coach. Nate Lamb and John Van Diest, other guys, when I say, how do you like Tyson Summers? Like, I love him. And, I mean, it's just that emphatic. Like, I love the guy. Like, they love playing for him. He brings energy. And, John Van Diest today told me, he goes, you don't really need a coach to, like, kind of pump you up, but he adds that extra little bit to you, and he's a guy that you kind of want to play for.
You mentioned you talked to John Van Diest. He's gotten a lot of media love early during camp. Who did you talk to today, and kind of break down what you learned from those interviews?
Yeah, really just like I said, Plan B. So John was standing there, so I talked a little bit about him, and I know you've written about him, so kind of the same type of thing. He's having a good camp and feels a lot more comfortable. I asked him about Jalen Sammy and said, how comfortable do you feel having him in front of you? He goes, very comfortable. He said he's pushing the pile and doing a great job. I talked to Ross Ells as he was standing there. He said that John's come along in that inside linebacker group, but a lot of those guys are kind of come along as well. And Els kind of mentioned something interesting to me because we were talking about like first year staff and all that. And he said, players are interesting. He goes, when you have a first year staff, because players are always great because players always recognize, well, the previous staff kind of got fired because we didn't do our job, and a new staff comes in, these guys are like, we got to play well, we got to perform, and he's seeing that. So I thought that was an interesting point. I hadn't really thought of it that way, but he's seeing that side of it. And Ross Sells, like a lot of coaches, has been around and been in a first-year staff a lot of times in his career. But he said that he's seeing that these guys just a lot. That's a lot of it. I mean, we're hearing how much these guys want it and all that stuff. I think a lot of that want to is what Ross Sells is saying, that hey, there's a realization here that they didn't perform last year and they need to step up.
You're going to take a day off tomorrow. Pat Rooney will fill in for you. Any big plans for your day off?
To not be here. Now, the kids go back to school next week, and so just try to take one last day with the kids and do something fun.
All right, sounds great. We'll be back tomorrow again with analysis from Pat Rooney.